What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Sean Mishka, the Movement Miyagi, coming to you once again on behalf of Football Beyond the Stats in our Mover of the Year deep dive, looking into what would happen, what would unfold if Lamar Jackson, our 2024 Mover of the Year, and myself, the Movement Miyagi, partner together in training in an attempt to facilitate even more skillful behavior from the most skillful mover in the National Football League. This is one of my very favorite videos to do each and every year. I started it, I want to say, back in 2021 with Jonathan Taylor, our 2021 Mover of the Year. And I just try to unpack and try to be overly transparent in regards to what I'm seeing in the analysis and how that analysis would serve to inform what might unfold in our global intentions in our learning environment, as well as the practice activities, the training activities that I would design, the problems I would set for the player to solve if they were to partner with me. So without further ado, let's get into it. It's going to be a fun one because, as I said, uh, on the blog for the Mover of the Year analysis with Lamar Jackson, this was a relatively tough one to do. And the reason why it was a tough one to do is because I believe that Lamar Jackson is the very epitome of dexterity. If this is your first time here, this might be your first time hearing me mention these words. That dexterity from Nikolai Bernstein, 1996, is the ability to find, let's call it coordinate, control, or organize a movement solution for any emerging movement problem under any situation in any condition. Meaning, as a performer, as a mover, as an athlete interacting with one's world, the environment is going to pose and present certain emerging movement problems. That is considered the what is in my world, or stealing and adopting from Bruce Lee. To interact with the what is and to do it skillfully, to find an adaptive, functional fit between oneself and that problem, the opportunities, the challenges, the perturbations, and the like, is really what we think about when we are assessing and evaluating movement skill at the highest of levels. What I'm attempting to do is capture how dexterous a performer might be. And Lamar Jackson in 2024, from my perspective, is as dexterous as it comes in this generation of NFL and American football players. Bernstein went on to say and add on to that quote that I just provided, that dexterity is not within the movements or actions themselves, but instead it's revealed in how these movements behave in their interaction with, again, that what is, with the environment. So, how oneself coordinates, controls, and organizes a movement solution through their perceptions, through their cognitions, and their actions. The intertwined, interwoven nature of those dimensions of the integrated movement solution or movement problem solving process. And of course, on an American football field, those problems are going to present challenges and perturbations, threats and opportunities due to the unexpectedness and surprises. And Lamar Jackson, as we can see even in these pictures, two plays that I just so happened, I promise I wasn't trying to pick on the Cincinnati Bengals here, but I think these two pictures, now they're just snapshots, so we can't truly see the interaction with, but what we can do is begin to speculate as to what might have been unfolding. And of course, both of these plays were ones that I featured in my Mover of the Year deep dive, the written form on Football Beyond the Stats. So we think about interacting with that what is and how that unfolds through the degrees of freedom perceptually, what one is looking at, when they are looking at it, what they might be feeling and sensing as we see Lamar Jackson kind of connecting in a functional way with that what is, with that problem. We think about the cognitions, the thoughts, the knowledge of, the intentional aims to act in a given way, the decisions one makes. And ultimately, we think about how that flows into the adaptability of one's actions in the moment, meaning how the motor system degrees of freedom again, are coordinated, controlled, and organized to meet the needs of that problem. But it's done in a very intertwined and interwoven fashion due to this interaction with. That is the how for me. And Lamar Jackson, the very essence of his movement skill is in this dexterity from my perspective. Not only is the dexterity in his movement skill kind of looked at from my perspective as being the epitome of, we see our theme for 2024, this riding the wave theme and idea. Lamar Jackson is the ultimate surfer on an American football field. Why do I feel that way? Well, what we see from him is authentic, honest, creative flair that he has for solving problems. But as he does so, often under tremendous challenge, tremendous complexity and perturbation, like he's able to surf that wave, ride that wave, and just interact with it. You can see if you rewind back to, I want to say it was early September, right leading into week 1 of this 2024 NFL campaign. I talked about this idea of a surfer riding a wave, and it was one that was a theme that was threaded throughout my learning environments with the players I partner with and work with. It was coined by a player of mine that I partner with, and it was really oriented around what the wave might show us or show the surfer as they interact with it. That the wave itself, yes, it's a problem, and it's a problem ultimately to be solved, but instead the wave exists to show us something about ourselves. And when I watch Lamar Jackson, I can't help but think about how he's really just interacting with the problems in that way, with that authentic and creative and honest flair. That expression comes out based on him just wanting to test himself, challenge himself based on interacting with the wave in that fashion. So it's almost like he's not so tied into the outcome or the result, that immediate outcome or result. If he goes down, or even if it's a third down going to a fourth down, like he's not constrained, he's not handcuffed, he's not forcing his way in many cases. Many cases. Now, there's some would be some instances that he would, and we highlighted that in our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that I captured and highlighted. But when we think about us working together, would want to think about how he interacts with problems in the world. And really, I just can't help but think about a surfer interacting with a wave when I watch Lamar Jackson on an American football field. It all kind of feeds into, in a perpetual way, his overall form of life. And I think that's one of the things that we find. Now, granted, this picture I think was snapped back in 2020 or 2021, leading up into a playoff game. And Lamar himself told John Harbaugh and the Baltimore Ravens, like, I want to be outside. We saw it again, or I heard a clip and saw a clip. I even tweeted it out recently around Lamar, bringing the entire team out and saying, we need to practice outside. All the rest of our games in the playoffs are going to be presented with challenges in forms of the changes to conditions. And even though that's something that I think I would want to lean into if he and I were to ever partner together, a wider range of conditions, and we'll get into that in a little bit. I think what we have found in the evolution and the growth of his movement skill comes from this surfer way of life. That anytime he's practicing, he's playing, and anytime he's playing, he's practicing. His way of doing and being and acting is really in his nature of how he solves problems and approaches them with this playful mentality, this surfer mentality, where he's just allowing the practice or performance environment to test him in some way, shape, or form and test his skill. And as he does that, he's searching and exploring. As he does that, he's finding new opportunities to act and interacting with them in different ways. And as he does that, so even when he's playing, he's essentially practicing. And it's in that, as I talk about in the mover of the year analysis as well, that we see how learning and performance for Lamar Jackson are really two sides of the same coin. We can't separate them from one another. So anytime he's playing, whether it's in practice or in training, or whether it's on Sundays, I think he's learning. I think he's growing. I think he's adapting because of the way he's entering that learning environment. And that learning environment, even if it's on an NFL Sunday under pressure, anxiety, fatigue, and the like, gives him an opportunity to evolve his movement skill. And because of that, that idea is one that if he and I were to partner together, I would use as a global intention, that I would guide that even further and attempt to get him and implore him to actually slow down, to search and explore even more. And when I say search and explore, I mean not only of his own movement toolbox and what is within it and how he might solve movement problems, but also what's in the world, to search and find those waves to interact with. When Lamar Jackson is at his best, yeah, he's in a playground mentality. He's playing backyard football. But in that, he's not tied into the result. So, because of that, and that seems weird because he's a franchise quarterback, MVP caliber, and multiple MVP award recipient, right? That in that, he's able to just be so free. And in that freeing process, he's then free to explore his perceptions, his cognitions, and actions. And the way that they fit together in relation to the what is and in relation to what's out there. So to lean into that, when we see Lamar Jackson actually ramp down in speed on Sundays, and here's a few different examples, we actually see him become much more sensitive and attuned to the what is in the information in the world, particularly that would specify his affordances or the opportunities to act. And we see that even in one that I think about, our week 17 movement play of the week against the Houston Texans, where he set the NFL career rushing record for quarterbacks. We saw him moving slower than what he's capable of. And because of that, he's still moving faster than everyone else. And I know that sounds weird, right? But that to me is the very essence of game speed. He's able to have this holistic, integrated movement problem solving process that becomes one with that respective problem. And I think it's there that if a coach, a trainer, whomever it might be, a facilitator of Lamar's skill were to lean into that even further and get him to turn down the volume sometimes so he's not always moving so quickly, he'd actually see that the landscape of affordances that exist out there are even more rich and vast and meaningful than they currently are for Lamar. And right now, they are as vast as it possibly can be for any player amongst the 1,696. I still think that there's more meat on the bone in this way. There's three specific opportunities that I would try to lean into with Lamar Jackson that I feel as though will that there's still more room to grow. They're still ripe for learning, even though he demonstrates and exhibits it over and over and over again on a football field in competition. This idea of being creative, to having a stylistic flair, and how it channels maybe his playful, deceptive nature. But it's an intentional and purposeful deception in many ways. As my dog here is trying to deceive me by trying to act as though she needs to go out right now. It's really apropos at the moment. She doesn't need to go, she just went. But I will say this about Lamar and our work together, if we were to work together. I would try to educate his intentions, meaning his ways of interacting or his attempts at interacting with any problem, to always have this authentic and honest expression of himself. Because it's that form of life that I feel as though leads to additional freedom for him. It leads to him putting together plays like this on these highlights, pulling the ball behind him, stopping on a dime, letting guys run by him, staring guys down, hurdling and being stylistic in the air. It's these types of things, guys and gals, that create the canvas for who he is, but the canvas as well for more growth and evolution within his craft. It's that what leads to the freedom. And he sees his own ways of interacting through this lens. And I think it's a place and a space that in training he should do more of. He shouldn't try to be constrained or hold back onto who he is in any way, shape, or form. Because it's there that in this alternative, meaning him being his authentic and creative self, that I feel as though he probably not only is he his best self, as I believe any performer would be, but it's what leads to maybe this next echelon of performance from him and for him. And I think that's why we continue to see this evolution as well. We see him with such a comfort in his own skin. He's not trying to be constrained or fit into somebody else's box or somebody else's model. Now, granted, that's always been Lamar Jackson. We go back to the Louisville days, we go back to his high school days, and you can see him put together plays just like the one on the upper left hand corner where he lets a guy run by him as he's en route to the end zone and he gets that little juke, stops on a dime, lets him run by, and he stares at him, right? But I think even more so across situations, Lamar might be able to do this even more. Speaking of across situations and conditions, I think this is a place in a space where Lamar would like himself to lean into. In fact, I can say that because of that picture I showed earlier when we are capturing dexterity in his practice, but also then with what I saw as HBO was looking into the Baltimore Ravens practice recently, leading up into the playoffs, and Lamar saying, we're going to have to play 3 cold weather games in order to get to the Super Bowl. So, in order to be playing on February 9th, I got to go through all these conditions. I got to see how the rain, the cold, the wind, everything come together. Fatigue, pressure, anxiety, as I mentioned here. And granted, this is still what I would consider one of the main opportunities for Lamar Jackson. He has not won the big one, right? He's won some big games, particularly in the regular season. But to be able to do that across conditions, to be the torchbearer of dexterity, one needs to be able to do that. So, under the brightest of lights, under the coldest of weather, under the more extreme and adverse conditions, to be able to coordinate, control, and organize movement solutions right then and there, just as you do when it's comfortable, when it's September, when the sun is shining, you're at home at M&T Bank Stadium. Now, when you go on the road and you might play in Buffalo or Kansas City or the like, what are you able to do in those situations? And now that's the test, right? But in preparing for the test, can we or could we, if we were a skill acquisition specialist working with the Baltimore Ravens or working with Lamar Jackson himself, could we expose him to these types of key performance inhibitors? And could we do it more strategically? Could we do it more frequently where he always has to perform under changing conditions? And that is something that I believe the answer is a yet unequivocal yes to, but that I feel as though I would really truly lean into because we can never be too adaptable under situations and conditions of the varying sort. And that's the thing. It's like having too fast a car, too much money, too hot a girlfriend, whatever it is, right? Like you can never be too dexterous across situations, various situations, as well as various conditions. Got to lean into that if I were working with Lamar Jackson. The third and final opportunity would be to really immerse him in the deepest of waters of complexity and challenge. Now, granted, I said that he is the most evolved of sorts, the most evolved mover in this way, the most dexterous mover since probably, in my estimation, guys like Jerry Rice or Barry Sanders and Lawrence Taylor, right? Like those types of individuals. Now we're talking the best of the best, the most skillful and dexterous to have ever done it in the National Football League. I believe that we're going to talk about Lamar Jackson in the same way, at least I already am. But I believe, again, is there something even more? Can he transcend himself and his skill to the next tier, a tier where nobody else stands? And in order to do that, kind of that Barry Sanders tier, you need to be able to solve problems that are currently unsolvable. Now, we will always be able to find, no matter who the player is, those types of problems where maybe one is at a disadvantage, numerical relations. All of a sudden, it's a 1v3, a 1v4, a 1v5. And of course, we could add a teammate into that. We might find changes to timing and spacing, right? To be able to tweak and adjust and force Lamar out of his comfort zone into his challenge point. Every player has that challenge point, no matter how dexterous they might be. Even Barry Sanders had those unsolvable problems that he would face, that no matter how dexterous you might be, there's always going to be a challenge point, which is a tipping point where we lose our grip over the field of affordances. Changing options, and particularly for Lamar Jackson, pass or run, and then across situations, right? And giving him more and more and more exposure where he can feel free to fall off the bike even more. Now, when he falls off the bike and makes a mistake as he explores and searches, it usually is happening in a game sense, right? Because even though I showed the picture before, the image and still shot before of Lamar in practice across conditions, maybe playing in the snow or practicing in the snow, I still think the game situations and slices, it's what's bringing the majority of his learning opportunities. Well, in training and in practice, if I were a skill acquisition specialist partnering with Lamar Jackson in any way, shape, or form, whether it was with the team, the Baltimore Ravens, or Lamar himself, I would find those problems that are unsolvable and let him immerse himself in those deepest of waters of complexity, numerous interacting components, parts, challenges, stretching him to that point and grip over the field of affordances. Typically, that's happening with guys chasing from behind or the sides, guys that one is facing from the front simultaneously, layers of movement problem that one needs to deal with, whether it's to pass or to run in some of these situations. Getting someone really uncomfortable and then make them more and more comfortable by being immersed within it. And I think it's there because of Lamar's way of doing, being, and acting, the surfer mentality, that what we see from Lamar Jackson is growth and evolution. We got to start doing it in training and in practice. Guys and gals of the movement world, obviously I love putting together these videos where I'm speculating as to what I would do and how I would do it if that most skillful and dexterous performer currently doing it in the NFL right now, my second two-time winner of the Mover of the Year in Lamar Jackson, just so happens to be where that think is around, right? Like where we're given a think and a thought experiment around. If you have questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas, feel free to fire a comment or hit the thumbs up or share it with your people or reach out to me in any number of different ways or fashions. This 2024 season, where we attempted to ride the wave together and investigate how players are riding the wave, was certainly a fun one for me personally. I hope it was for you as well, as we attempt to capture the essence of the most skillful performers on a National Football League as they ride that wave. Right now, right here in 2024, we see Lamar Jackson as that essence and new king of dexterity on an American football field. I'm the Movement Miyagi. This is Football Beyond the Stats, our Mover of the Year deep dive. I will talk to you guys in 2025.